This idea is a bit new, using modern understandings in neurology and psychology. As it's a new idea and a way of thinking, I may get a lot of backlash from certain groups. There may be ethical ideas I've overlooked as well, so this is just a proposed idea and there may be multiple options to deal with this issue. At the current moment in science, diagnosing psychopaths and sociopaths are sort of relative depending on the psychologist doing the analysis. Biases can get in the way as well as cultural backgrounds. Psychopaths, among other things, are people characterized by shallow emotions, in particular reduced fear, increased stress tolerance, lacking empathy, cold-heartedness, lacking guilt, egocentricity, superficial charm, manipulativeness, irresponsibility, impulsivity, and antisocial behaviors such as parasitic lifestyles and criminality. They also often gain pleasure from the pain or suffering of others. Neurology is showing that there are problems with the circuitry from the mirror neurons to the amygdala that wires the wrong emotional responses to the stimulus that is most beneficial to society. Sociopaths have a lot in common with psychopaths, except they just lack empathy and can't grasp that others have the same emotions and pain as they do. Sociopaths, unlike psychopaths, are believed to have a reduced number of mirror neurons preventing empathy. The ideas of most ethics tend to be lost on them. They are often driven by power and money, they often get into high positions of power, they are very good at manipulating, they are reckless, and they care very little about others. These disorders can occur genetically or from childhood trauma. There are quite a few that do well in society, but sadly, many of them make up a large percent of people in prisons as well as in politics, finance, and powerful corporate positions. The effects they have on society can create mobs through manipulation, creating more psychopaths in the world thanks to childhood trauma. In about 10 years, however, as fMRI keeps dropping in price, developing a solid definition and analysis of these two groups will most likely become very easy. In 20 to 30 years, as computers keep getting smaller and smaller, treatment for these diseases may very well be possible, such as a chip in your head to increase and simulate mirror neurons. At the point of definitive diagnosis, however, what forms of ethics should we follow in enforcing treatment, or should we? Data shows that every form of atrocity and oppression has been at least influenced, if not caused, by this 5% of the population. Just being a politician gives you compassion fatigue, which is bad enough, but if a person without empathy is struggling and craving power with the manipulative ability to do it, that's just a recipe for disaster and has plagued humanity since the dawn of time. Of course, the first thing we cannot do is vilify or scapegoat them. They're just doing what their brain tells them is logical, just as we are. On top of that, when dealing with them in a political context, as they have massive levels of power, few ethics, and the best PR, they will spin this as they're the Jews and we're the Nazis. However, a closer analogy is having a Parkinson's patient being allowed to work with class 4 biological hazards. We aren't vilifying them, they just shouldn't be in a position of power as their disability can damage all of us. One possible concept would be to propose that this population could receive a housing and food stipend, receiving disability, and they wouldn't be taxed since they were not being represented. They would also not be allowed in positions of power in exchange for the stipend that would ensure that they could live comfortably even if they can't get a high-paying job. Treatment could not be enforced, but could be recommended, and criminals could have reduced prison sentence time with operations and rehabilitation. As they are the people who make our society require so many laws, perhaps they can live with a different, slightly more invasive legal system in exchange for being provided help for housing and food, so the rest of us can live with more freedom and somewhat less regulation. It would be much cheaper than prison. As they're defined as reckless, the money would be given directly to landlords. We would also have to set up a system to prevent job discrimination for the jobs they can work in, much like any other disability. Japan is an interesting cultural evolutionary example of dealing with psychopaths as they focus on honor as opposed to empathy like the West, and conformity as opposed to individuality. Their crime rate is incredibly low by comparison with the US, and they can leave merchandise out on the streets. People lacking empathy can get honor and social pressure easier than they can empathy. However, this high-pressure system with few outlets for emotional release has a big impact on the rest of the people, causing suicide rates to be through the roof. Of course, we come to the legal issue. It's not like we don't have centuries of precedent for the removal of constitutional rights for medical reasons. Schizophrenics routinely get physically restrained as standard treatment, even if they pose no threat to themselves or others. No one bothers to ask them, they're just the others, and there are campaigns now to try and stop this treatment by the few schizophrenics that actually have been able to claw their way to respectable positions. So we have more than legal precedent for implementing this on psychopathic population, and it would prevent a lot of crime, blue, clergy, and white collar, with the latter having the most impact on the population. And with less trauma caused by them, their population would shrink to a more genetic level, and even more when we have treatments for them. There is the worry that without power, they may work in the underground and the mob to get power they crave. This is already happening, so the change won't be so much, and we can keep better tabs on them anyway. Treatment of these individuals, as well as more proportional representation of gender in politics, business, and banking to prevent a critical mass of reckless testosterone, would significantly stabilize their lives and economy and help us move forward as a people. However, it's an extremely touchy subject that I'm sure I haven't thought of all the effects or ethical implications. This is just an idea, and it isn't even viable for at least 10 years. Tell me what you think. Thank you.